Are you a physician looking to take your own profitable medical expert witness practice to the next level? MedicalExpertWitness.com is the ultimate program to learn how to brand yourself as an expert witness and get yourself seen. Building a reputation in the field from scratch has its challenges, but don't let them hold you back.
MedicalExpertWitness.com understands what you are facing, as they were once there too. In fact, 10 years ago, CEO Dr. Jordan Romano started his own consulting in the medical malpractice space. His experience has included providing expert witness testimony, reviewing medical records, and analyzing complex medical cases. Dr. Romano has become well-versed in the intricacies of medical malpractice law and has worked on cases for both plaintiffs and defendants in nearly every state in the U.S. And now his company provides medical professionals with the tools and support they need to supercharge their career as a medical expert witness. Sounds great, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Just imagine having the support you need to brand yourself as a medical expert witness too. Now that's powerful. So what are you waiting for? Visit MedicalExpertWitness.com today and gain access to a mentor who can connect you with attorneys in need of your specialized knowledge, expand your network, find new cases, and watch your business thrive.
Finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo, no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Drs. May and Tim Hindmarsh.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another Thursday episode with your hosts, co-hosts, Dr. May and Dr. Tim Hindmarsh. And we got a great show for you this week. So clinical trials and medical research play a crucial role in advancing healthcare and improving patient outcomes, and they provide valuable insights into the effectiveness and safety of new treatments, medications, and interventions.
And in this episode, we have our friend, Dr. Sabine the Hurricane Hazan, a renowned researcher, shares her expertise in conducting clinical trials and medical research, and also how things got really weird and corrupted during COVID. She goes into some detail with this. It is just a great show, and we are super psyched to have her back. She is a force of nature, literally, when it comes to her passion for medicine, for helping people, and specifically the gut microbiome. You will love this.
And I should throw in another little teaser that we get into the details of how, yet again, some great research censored and pulled off some of the mainstream platforms just because some ears don't like to hear it, and it just challenges the narrative. So more about medical censorship too.
Okay. Buckle up, kids. We have the hurricane herself, Dr. Sabine Hazan, back. And we are going to talk about all sorts of things, some of her new research, how some of it has been immediately censored as soon as you say the I word, and how this has been one of the top 20 things that she has discovered during COVID with her research company, ProgenaBiome, is medicine has been corrupted. And where we go from here now, I don't know. But again, welcome, Dr. Hazan. We are so glad to have you back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So let's start a little bit with a little bit of your background. How many studies have you done with the FDA for pharma, et cetera, et cetera?
Probably close to 300, I want to say. So I started at University of Florida. See this nice little poster here? Mm-hmm. The Dean Research Award, University of Florida, most for the best fellow. So that was the first, that was the beginning. I took a position at University of Florida for 1 year of research because I wanted to match with my husband. You know, we like to match with our husbands and stay together. And so You should know. You
That's
got
important. Being in the
yes.
same physical location as your significant other
Yeah.
makes
Well,
a
I know my
difference.
husband was a real asshole, so I
Oh,
just matched with me. So,
So anyway, so I wanted to be with my husband. So I took a year of research the first year, and then I jumped into GI the second year. I was the first woman to be accepted at University of Florida. So I basically said, "Look, I'm going to start your research. I think I'm good at research." So basically, I started research with Dr. Sami Akim at University of Florida. And really, that was the beginning of introduction to clinical trials. Back then we didn't have these nice fancy electronic medical records and data capture and middlemen. It was really between the pharmaceutical company and the doctor. And, there was an idea, and then that idea was essentially researched. And we had these nice little binders for patients, which kept everything confidential. And then we would send the data. And if we saw improvement, we were like, yay, it worked. The drug worked. If we didn't, well, we said, I'm sorry, you need to go back to the lab and relook at that, right? So that was 1998, and then from there I entered GI, and after GI, my attending, and after this Dean's Research Award, my attending said to me, "You really should continue research. You're really good at it." My studies back then were on visceral hyperalgesia, which is I like to call it the Princess and the Pea syndrome, which is like these patients that have chest pain. Non-cardiac chest pain, but it's really because their esophagus is very sensitive. They feel, so we used to put balloons in people's esophagus and blow it up and see if they felt the balloon. And so we basically noticed that they had an oversensitivity, and we started treating them with drugs like, amitriptyline, trazodone, octreotide. So that was really my claim to fame at the beginning. But I was also doing clinical trials on, for pharmaceutical companies with University of Florida for, reflux medications, biologics. Remember, that was the beginning of biologics.
Mm-hmm.
The studies of Remicade came on to GI first before he went on to others. So as I was doing clinical trials, my sister was also finishing her residency and started a clinical trial company. And her first drug was a childhood obesity drug. So she had, at the same time in LA, started opening a clinical trial company where she would do a lot of clinical trials. And me and my husband were kind of consulting, with her and helping her. And so over the years, I was always doing this, after GI, I was doing, maybe 10% clinical research and then 90% GI. And then with kids, we've moved to California. My sister was in LA. My dad's like, "Why don't you start opening up your research center in Ventura since you're not coming to LA so much?" So I basically opened up Ventura Clinical Trials, and 10% research became 90% research and 10% GI. And what I was known for was really C. diff, Clostridium difficile. Because, back then, that was really at the beginning of fecal transplant, right? All of us were starting to do fecal transplant, and fecal transplant was expensive, the procedure was not covered. The analysis of the stools was not covered. So I kind of figured out, I called it Robin Hood in a way. I would do these clinical trials for pharma, get paid to enroll these patients for pharma. And if the clinical trial didn't work for C. diff, I would do fecal transplant with the money I got paid from pharma to do that research. So in a way, I was taking, from the rich and giving to the poor and treating and curing these patients, right? So, one C. diff, two C. diff, 100 later. And, I'm noticing, wow, all these patients are like improving with fecal transplant. But again, it was expensive to do. I was not in an academic center where it's covered. These county hospitals, they cover a lot of that because it's part of the county takes care of that. So, basically from that, you cannot, when you do clinical trials, you cannot just do one clinical trial on C. diff. So you have to start doing venture out. So me and my husband really partnered, and he was doing all the cardiology studies. I was doing GI. And then little by little, me, I bring doctors to the platform, and I started bringing on like an oncologist, a couple of rheumatologists, a couple of dermatologists. Pretty soon, we were about 300 doctors, and we started doing all sorts of clinical trials. From rheumatology to dermatology to neurology, Alzheimer's. one particular, and that was really the change for me, or the turning point, is I was doing C. diff clinical trials, but I was doing Alzheimer's clinical trials. And one of my patients that had Alzheimer's, his mini mental status was 21. Now, remember, as GI, we don't do mini mental status, right? That's neurology. But when you do clinical trials, you're forced to learn how to do mini mental status. And they give you like this iPad with all the questionnaires and all the questions. So I became very, very knowledgeable in doing mini mental status. So I did it on this patient, and he couldn't participate in the study because he was so severe. And then next thing you know, like a couple months later, he developed C. diff. And of course, I put him in a clinical trial for C. diff. It didn't work. So I start giving him, I start giving him vancomycin. It's not working. Medications are not working. So I essentially, on the third shot, and he's still having diarrhea, and he's not golfing, and he's miserable, and he's, Alzheimer's on top of that. I decided, you know what, I'm just going to give him his wife's poop, who was super sharp, super happy. That's why you're always nice to your spouse. You never know when you're going to need their shit. So literally, I'm so nice to my husband since that case, by the way. I don't even fight with him at all. Like, the room could be a mess. I'm like, I don't care.
May's been taking mine for a while anyways.
Well, my husband's been taking mine too. So I always say he's the only one that can handle my shit, really.
Oh, that's funny.
So anyway, so next thing you know, the guy comes into my clinic a month later, and he remembers things. Like, he starts correcting me. And next thing you know, I start redoing the mini mental status, and he went from 21 to 26.
Which is
so already I was blown away, right? Because I'm like, wow, in a month, what changed? All I did was give him his wife's poop, right? And I didn't have this sophisticated genetic sequencing lab back then that I could match the donor. All I did was just take the stools, right? So collected for in the event I have a genetic sequencing lab. So next thing you know, I called the neurologist and I go, did you do a mini mental status on this guy? He goes, yeah, his mini mental status is 26. I go, wow. So then again, 3 months, 6 months later, I see him, mini mental status 29. And you know those little square with the triangles that are like just juxtaposed in a mental status? He drew them perfectly.
I get them wrong. I do this.
Well,
in my job, I do have to administer them every weekend. So now I have the thing memorized, but I can't still draw that thing properly. And I'm like, oh, this is a bad sign.
And just for our listeners, so they understand, a normal mini mental status is 30.
Yes.
So if you do a normal, if you do a mental status exam on a 25-year-old and they don't have a brain injury, it's 30. If you do it on Einstein, it's 30. That's the answer. So 29 is like, you missed a couple numbers counting back from 100.
That would be me.
That was exactly.
So anyway, so that was the thing, right? So this guy remembered, and he was mini mental status 29. So I'm going crazy because I'm like, oh my God, fecal transplant. That's the only explanation, right? And so I kept it in the back of my mind, right? This case, I never really wrote it because I'm like, oh, everybody's going to think I'm crazy. And then next thing you know, this path of, seeing cases, right? The microbiome gets momentum. My patients from Malibu, and this is how literally it happened. My patients from Malibu come to me and they're like, the microbiome is huge. I'm like, well, it started with C. diff because we were doing fecal transplant. And then they're like, you really should be doing these tests on your patients, these stool testing. And I looked at that, right? One of my friends was the CEO of Zoe's Kitchen. And he's my next door neighbor. And he basically would show me his stool test. And he's like, look at this. I've got all these bugs in my colon. And how come you don't know what it means? And I'm like, well, what do they mean? Like, what does Bacteroides vulgaris mean? And, like all these bugs that we had no idea, that we never studied. You know what I mean? And so I started looking at that report and I said, well, you know what? Because Malibu patients are pretty much, they're a little bit ahead of stuff, right? They have like their, these celebrities, they have their private, concierge that handles everything, that finds the best doctor, that finds the best treatment. They look up everything. They hire, companies to give the best treatment. So they're on top of it most of the time. So I decided to call the company. The company was called Ubiome. So Ubiome, I called the rep and I go, hey, I have a lot of affluent patients that probably can afford your stool testing. And I think you may be onto something if we could look at stool testing before and after fecal transplant to see what's going on. But by the way, who are your donors? Because you have a normal here, right? And then he said to me, he goes, oh, the normals are the owners of the company. So right there was like red flag. What do you mean the donors are the owners of the company? So I said, so you mean to tell me the owners of the company are the standard? Like they're healthy, they had a colonoscopy, they're like, they matched me. Like, how is their microbiome the same as mine? And, we're from different places. Why? And do I have the same microbes as they do? And are they eating sushi? Are they eating vegan, vegetarian, meat? All these questions started going in my mind, right? And I'm a hurricane, right? So the thing is, what happened was I started saying, well, you know what? This is interesting, right? And then I called the rep again to see if the test was like validated, right? And the rep disappeared, like he was fired. Okay. Next thing you know, it was like a slew of events that happened. Like there was an investigation, they got indicted, the CEOs got indicted. But remember, the CEOs got indicted, but everybody that worked under them didn't get indicted, right? So they probably like plea bargained with the FBI to report these guys or something, right?
And what year is this in? I'm wondering, approximately.
8-9 years ago, I want to say.
And were they the first company that's doing stool testing?
Yes, those were the first company that was doing
testing.
So anyway, so they were indicted, and then next thing you know, or was it 5 years, 6 years? So all the years are kind of going, but
not that long ago.
It was not that long ago. I think you can Google it; it's in there.
Okay.
Ubiome indicted. I think they're like escaped or they're like fugitives, or I don't know what's going on there.
I'm going to.
Yeah, Google. You're gonna see. You're gonna end up in this maze of, oh my God, it's like a movie. So anyway, so next thing you know, that company went under, and I'm thinking, well, you know what, this is not a bad idea, right? So I start sending stool testing to different companies that are now starting to do it, and I'm noticing there's different results. Like in one company, I have some Akkermansia, and another company, I've got some Clostridium. So I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense. Even within the same company, the test was not the same. So in other words, the same stool sample, 2 different tubes, 2 different names that I would put on, different results. And a blogger actually started blogging on that, saying different results. You remember that, right?
Yeah.
So from there, I decided, you know what? I have a clinical research company. I've done clinical trials. I think what this field needs is clinical trials on the microbiome. And that's when I started ProgenaBiome. So ProgenaBiome was really me as the sponsor, me trying to understand the microbiome on a clinical basis. And then, of course, at the same time that I started ProgenaBiome, I said, well, I need doctors that are like me that are doing fecal transplant because I want to understand the stools before and after. And started noticing all these doctors that actually have had amazing results on, chronic urinary tract infections, on not psoriasis, but on alopecia areata, Colleen Kelly, who had 2 cases that improved with fecal transplant. So a lot of doctors had a lot of different side effects of these fecal transplant that improved other diseases. And so I joined them up and I called it the Biome Squad. And then from there, I started the Malibu Microbiome meeting to really talk about this, right? To say, hey, let's talk about it. Let's talk about what we see without pharma. Let's create a microbiome meeting that's really for doctors to help other doctors that see what's going on, non-biased, non-pharma money. Just really let's talk about what we're seeing, right? Ethically, righteously. So basically so ProgenaBiome was created, the Biome Squad was created, the Malibu Microbiome was created. March was our first meeting of 2020. And prior to that, I had joined up with Dr. Tom Borody, who basically is the father of fecal transplant. And he kept pushing me to write my data. He kept saying, you've got to write those cases. You've got to write your cases. Because I always felt that, you know, there's a certain type of population that was the best donor. There was a certain, you know, matching, etc. And he's like, you've got to write this. If you don't write it, nobody's going to follow. And I'm like, I'm a hurricane. I don't like to sit down and write things. So basically, I wrote that first case, the Alzheimer's. First, I wrote my epic case, which was thinking outside the box and figuring out a case of an ectopic stomach by causing intussusception. So that was the first case I ever wrote because I wanted to show that, you know, thinking outside the box. So that was already, you know, I didn't know what I was, you know, I kind of like jump on things, right? And I get a gut feeling of what I'm supposed to be writing. And that case was really the first one because to me, it was like such an incredible case of a 17-year-old with intussusception. And I pushed the scope by surgically, like the surgeon did a laparoscopy and advanced my scope to the area of lesion. And for the first time, we saw an ectopic stomach in the small bowel causing intussusception, causing the obstruction in this girl and all her symptoms. And so because she was a model, I didn't want to give her a zipper, you know, cut. I had him do a laparoscopy via the belly button. And then I kind of pushed the scope.
So she had an extra stomach.
Extra ectopic stomach
in her intestine. Wow.
It's the coolest case ever. So I published that case first. And then the second case was really my Alzheimer's patient. It took a long time for the journal to approve it because they didn't really believe that you could change Alzheimer's with fecal transplant. So when I showed the case, when I showed them the mini mental status before and after, that's when they published it.
Wow.
And so from there, you know, I went to the top neurologist at UCLA and USC, Dr. Sheldon Jordan. And I said, look at this case. And he's like, I knew there was something more than the brain. We need to start tapping into the bowels. So you're going to be in charge of the bowels and I'm going to be in charge of the brain. And then somebody's going to be in charge of in between. And so we started the Regenesis project, Dr. Sheldon and I, and we've been studying neurological diseases. And then as, you know, COVID hit, you know, we were the first lab to find COVID in the stools. We were the lab that found the loss of bifidobacteria in severe COVID patients. And then we were the ones that found vitamin C increases the bifidobacteria, ivermectin increases the bifidobacteria within 24 hours of ingestion. And then from there, the vaccines kill your bifidobacteria. So in a nutshell, kind of a hurricane of research from an early humbling path of just being a fellow in research to getting to this level where, you know, it's all about searching for the truth. And
so I have a couple questions. This first one probably might not matter, but my first thought is, so when they had, after the what's it called, Ubiome company, and the other ones popping up that were doing stool testing, when you said there was all these differing results, so someone would send their stool sample in and they would just get different smattering of results in their microbiome, the first thought that, you know, comes to mind, I'm sure, is that someone who's not in medicine is even listening is like, well, that's scary, because what if you send your labs in for a blood test or a strep test in your throat if you're getting different results from different labs? And so how is that possible that they would get a different result? And how do you standardize that, I guess?
Yeah, so that's the hard part, right? And the other part, so we have these debates, you know, with doctors at the college, American College of Gastro, all the time. In fact, there was an amazing lecture by the head of genomics at Cedars-Sinai, who's basically doing a lot of research at Cedars-Sinai, and Dr. Alex Gurutz, who's the head of University of Minnesota. He's the one that provides me my poop samples when I don't have a perfect donor. I like to go to him because he basically screens these patients. You know, he's a physician, so I trust his judgment with stools because I know that he's done a study. You know, he's looked at like whether my patient is psychotic or whether the patient is on medications or suicidal. You know, he does a proper workup. So I know these patients that are coming to me as donors are good donors. So anyway, so Alex and I were talking about that. And at that lecture, that's a big problem, because if the test is not validated, verified, and reproducible, you don't have a standard, for one thing. For two, how do you standardize, considering that everybody is different, right? Like, you're different than I am. You eat different foods. You traveled the world. I've traveled different places. So, how do you standardize that? That's the other thing. And then the other thing is, the methods of analysis. Are they contaminating those samples, and are they collecting properly, right? And when they're collecting, are they taking a proper history of all that, right? So until you start doing it in a clinical trial format, where basically you're asking all those million questions, right? So you can compare apples and apples instead of apples and oranges. You can't really standardize this test. And here's the worst part. If you cannot standardize the test, you are fooling the public, because now you're telling patients, well, you've got H. pylori. Do you have H. pylori? Or is H. pylori just living in your gut because you've been exposed to to a couple of colonies of H. pylori because you traveled to Egypt or Africa or, wherever, right? So to me, that's a test without the physician behind it to know the clinical is dangerous. It's totally dangerous.
And then I was going to ask about the other thing.
And
by
the way, how Biome got busted is they started billing Medicare and triple billing.
Yeah,
so,
that's a no-no.
Yeah, that always ends poorly.
So,
yes.
And then we know that people have been studying the leaky gut sort of theory for years before. Obviously past 5-8 years when all this with Biome and the company started happening. So at the time, the leaky gut theory, there still was no big understanding of the microbiome, though, correct? It was just the theory that something's in your intestines. We would assume toxins from food or waste products that would then get across through the cell barrier and into the bloodstream, but not knowing all the things in there.
I think really C. diff got us to here, right? I think C. diff really, got us to understand the dysbiosis, in my opinion. Why? Because C. diff is that bug that if you kill the diversity, you kill all its families, it's going to start flourishing and it's going to secrete toxins to start killing the host. That's what we've come to understand anyways, especially having looked at what do we do to C. diff on a genetic sequencing. So for example, I'll take a patient with C. diff and I'll give him vancomycin. Well, his Shannon index, which is the diversity of the microbiome, would start maybe at 3. Now I give him vancomycin. Do you know what happens to that diversity?
Yeah, it
goes
down to 2 or 1.
1 to 2 to 1. And now you're giving him fidaxomicin, right? Thinking, damn, I haven't killed that C. diff. That C. diff is still resistant, right? So now I'm going to give him fidaxomicin. And guess what happens to that diversity? It drops even more to 0.8. So now you have a patient that's running around. Well, he doesn't have C. diff anymore because you definitely have killed C. diff, but you've killed everything else, right? So now you've killed everything else, and this guy is like bare to the world. He's sterile. Now, what happens to a guy that is sterile, that goes off to China or Japan or gets exposed to different microbes, and he doesn't have any microbes to recognize any microbes, right? He's going to catch a bunch of bad microbes, right? So then he's going to start having other problems.
Well, this is like chemotherapy, basically, in a nutshell. It's what you're doing.
Yeah, it's a bone marrow transplant, except in your colon.
Yeah.
And we're not, so what are we doing with fecal transplant? And this is the amazing thing that we learned from fecal transplant, is we are replenishing microbes. We're not killing C. diff. We're not going after C. diff and saying, oh my God, I got to kill it. More antibiotics. We're saying, let's bring on the Clostridium. Let's bring on the Bifido. Let's bring on the Ruminococcus. Let's give you a good, diverse microbe that replenishes your gut. So essentially, yes, you've killed off everything with vancomycin and fidaxomicin, and then you replenish. And now you have a new growth of your microbes, a new
It's
garden.
basically like giving someone an immune transfusion.
And you're giving them a new life, really. And that's why these people start having like noticing, hey, my arthritis is better. I grew hair, or all sorts of things.
So obviously, this is the tip of the iceberg for what other illnesses and diseases
actually
are.
it's the tip of the Schittsburg. But
yes, the tip of the Schittsburg.
But it's really fascinating because I think we talked about this the last time we spoke, which is this thing I've come up with after my God knows how many hundreds of hours of reading and giving myself a degree in virology during COVID, which is I think we've hit peak germ theory. Germ theory worked really good when everyone died of infectious disease. Now what we have is this absolute onslaught of chronic illness. We have, 100 times, 10 times or 50 times more kids with autism. We have all these rheumatologic diseases.
Parkinson's, yes.
Parkinson's disease, neurodegenerative diseases.
Cancer in the young.
Yeah,
So I'm thinking, let's test everybody's poop.
Yeah,
right?
but it's
and compare it.
But the thing that's interesting is, and I'm sure you're familiar with Dr. Peter Abbe and his wife Christine Ben. And basically he did like a 10-minute TED talk that just I read a bunch of their stuff, then I heard him speak and it blew my mind. And basically what he said is, in Western medicine we have a seek and destroy mentality. Mm-hmm. So, if there's an outbreak of measles, seek and destroy, vaccinate everyone, make sure that the measles outbreak is gone. If you have cancer, seek and destroy, cut it out when you can, throw chemo at it, do whatever you can. And, from his research in Guinea-Bissau, which he's done for, almost 45 years now,
right?
They look at this and he says, no, vaccines are not seek and destroy missions. Vaccines are immune modulating agents. And because they started to see with the live measles vaccine that if you either had a measles vaccination with the live vaccine, or you were a child that survived measles, you actually had decreased all-cause mortality, and you had less risk of dying of every infectious disease, not just measles. So he's like, whoa. We're not out there just trying to prevent measles. We need to look at these agents like what they are, which is immune modulators. We need to look at antibiotics for what they are, which is also immune modulators. We need to look at our crappy American diet for what it is, which is an immune modulator. So I have I've given more vaccines than than probably you and May combined, honestly, because I saw so many patients for such a long period of time. But now I'm at this point where I'm like,
have I done too much?
Exactly. It's what, maybe we'll do an entire show on it because I'm so passionate about this, which is,
I agree.
Which is shit works till it doesn't work anymore.
100%. 100%.
Well, so
and by the way, so immune modulators, but are they? Is that what we were taught? Is that what we tend in science? So here's the thing. We've all followed these books behind me, right? We've all read these books, but how much of these books is wrong, right? You look at Harrison, right? In medicine, textbook of medicine. The digoxin was like the number one drug for cardiac disease. Now it's like you don't even talk about the digoxin. No. So how much of it is wrong, right? Is what I'm saying. Is, we thought one bug, one disease, kill the bug, get rid of the disease, right? Until C. diff taught us it's not one bug, one disease. It's not one bug on an island alone. It's one bug. You kill that one bug, you kill other bugs. No bug is on its own. And you kill other bugs, you create an imbalance and a dysbiosis. And that's what starts the domino effect. So really, I think, maybe, at a time where we had polio that was going rampant, that vaccine was great, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe at the time where measles was going rampant, maybe that vaccine was great. I'll tell you, I had measles as a kid. In fact, I had measles, mumps, and rubella.
Yeah, me too.
I was in Morocco. There was like nothing. You know what the answer of my doctor in Morocco was a rectal suppository. Do you wonder why I went into GI and why I became a doctor?
Right.
I mean, like, the whole time, I'm like, how is it always the same answer, a rectal suppository? So to me, I was like, I got to get into medicine because these guys are like not thinking, that's why I went into medicine, because I figured, if I'm going to fix myself when I'm older and I have abdominal pain, I don't want to be again
Oh,
getting,
rectal suppository.
and probably why, I went into GI.
Maybe it's a rectal shit suppository though, is the answer, right?
That was the hint. Maybe it was like,
Just
clue.
you wait.
Good clue. Just you wait. So anyway, so what I'm saying is that, so I had measles, mumps, and rubella. And lo and behold, I start my residency at University of Miami, Jackson Memorial Hospital, and they mandated for me to get the MMR.
I know.
And all of a sudden, I kid you not, I broke out in a huge rash. I couldn't eat eggs, wheat. I was allergic to like 4 things: eggs, milk, wheat, and something else. And I'm like, well, what am I supposed to eat? The doctor's like, rice cake. So, you kind of like learn, you go back through this, through where I am right now, right? Because I'm the girl that basically was bringing vaccine, like you were giving vaccines to kids. I was bringing vaccines to the market with pharmaceutical companies, I was developing the vaccines and doing the clinical trial to bring it to the market. So the same way that this whole path of like understanding the microbiome a little bit, and really a little bit, because we're so far from understanding the microbiome, but understanding a little bit made me go back to my own history, of the MMR and saying, did I really need to have an MMR after I had measles, mumps, and rubella? Was that really smart? And, do I need to vaccinate my kids if I am already immune to it and I'm passing my microbes to my kids, right? So that's the thing. I think what we're going to learn on the microbiome is that we are passing on microbes. I have microbes in my gut that my mother has, that my if you look at those microbes, you could say, oh yeah, this was in the 1800, they had this bug. It's in my gut, right? I'm not going to say what it is. But the fact is, there are microbes that, where did it come from? Did it come from my mom, who got it from her mom? So I think we are passing somehow that immunity to our children. And I think continuing to give these vaccines, in my opinion, not knowing if we have the immunity, it might be a mistake, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And
Well,
we're still learning things like, I was listening to, I'm trying to even remember what it was. I know, a talk by another physician we interviewed, but an endocrinologist who says that now we know that women who have insulin resistance and diabetes have altered mitochondria, that when they are pregnant, they will pass that abnormality on to their newborn, new formed baby with an already, abnormal mitochondrial function and for insulin resistance, just because the mom's
Right.
mitochondria are already non-functioning. And so,
So-
there's multiple
so
systems,
proving-
not just gut microbiome.
So proving at the subcellular level that yes, it really is your mother's fault.
You just wanted to get that in. You
But
just
the
wanted
mother
to.
is the husband, though, right? So
Yeah.
she gets some microbes from the husband.
There you
Yeah,
go.
but the mitochondria come all the way, is always from the female line. So
You know that they say, like, in some religions, they say the religion follows the mother. And I think it's probably because the microbes follow the mother.
Exactly.
yeah, no, but it is really fascinating. And we did a show, one of our Doc Tales with Cocktails fun shows, and we talked a little bit about Ignatz Semmelweis, and how, Semmelweis was like, wash your hands after an autopsy so you don't kill your patients when you're delivering a baby. And they threw him into an insane asylum and beat him to death.
Of course.
And that was
Mhm.
just 50 years before,
Right.
Jenner and Pasteur basically, started germ theory. Well, I
Right.
think we're at a
Wow,
point.
yes.
I think we're at a point now where germ theory worked perfect, and now it's not working. Like, it works if you have an pneumonia, we can, figure out what's infecting you and give you appropriate antibiotics and all of that kind of stuff. But this idea that Western society needs to be on a seek and destroy mission for every infectious disease is just plain idiotic.
especially
It
with
doesn't make
vaccines.
sense anymore.
And,
Like,
and
why
I,
are we vaccinating for stuff that no one has had in the last
well,
50 or 60 years?
and here's the thing: why are we still talking about COVID vaccine? Why are we still vaccinating with like 4 years ago strains, right? So I think that really showed us the where we are, that it's a business. And it's a business that's a cash cow. The baby's born and you give them all these vaccines. It keeps making money for pharma. So I think that's the problem is we've made medicine, we've made the field that was so sacred into a business.
Well, I don't
So
know.
this,
The first light bulb moment for us was years ago, and we did it to our kids. But it was, why are we giving hepatitis B vaccine to like infants? Like, well, what's their risk?
yeah, I mean, it
Let's
makes
just make-
perfect sense. It makes perfect sense to give a hepatitis B vaccine to an infant if the mother is hepatitis B infected. That they have a if they get infected as an infant, they have 100%
Right,
chance.
but they're in the hospital.
But
Line them
but
up.
but
just
here's my
start-
beautiful wife who hasn't come within a country mile of IV drug abuse, a whorehouse, or a tattoo shop. That somehow, our babies have to be vaccinated at 24 hours of age.
Right.
Yeah, that was my first.
No,
thought
well,
of-
the one that got me the first was varicella. I'm like, why the hell are we vaccinating for
That was-
chicken?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
mean, that
yes.
was just
Well,
crazy.
speaking of research and
But
vaccines
all these vaccines
And corruption.
and corruption,
yes, corruption. My favorite thing.
I was going to say. So, tell us.
I think ProgenaBiome was created to light up the corruption. I really believe that.
Yeah, well, let's get into your continued research and
Yes.
ongoing through COVID.
And how after 300 trials working for big pharma and getting things through the FDA, all of a sudden you are insane and must be canceled. How did that happen?
You know what was interesting is I had the FDA in my office, probably be about a year and a half, 2 years in November. And I've had the FDA in my office a lot for different trials. And we never had a 483 when I was doing clinical trials for pharmaceutical companies.
What's a 483?
483 is basically a slap on the hand that says, hey, Dr. Hazan, you've done something wrong. Do corrective actions or you're not going to do research anymore. And basically I never had a 483 in all these years of doing research. And then all of a sudden I do a clinical trial on ivermectin. And here I am like, I had the FDA for another case. And I was so excited to show them my data with ivermectin because I wanted to show that nobody died, right? And this is the way to stop the pandemic, right? They're going to see it before I finish the trial and everything. Well, lo and behold, we didn't realize we didn't submit a continuing review on time to the regulatory board. Continuing review is basically one of those forms. You say all your patients are fine, nothing's changed, the consent is the same, allow us to continue. And partly the IRB didn't really remind us. Normally you get this hey, you're missing your continuous review. So we didn't get that. And we were busy taking care of some days there were like 50 patients a day I was taking care of with COVID. So my mind thinking of I need to submit a form to continue this clinical trial while I'm, paying for this trial out of my money, right? Because this is the ivermectin doxycycline was my trial. So we basically got a 483, which I thought was a little bit rough for a form. It's not like I didn't consent patients properly. It's not like I was doing anything fraudulent. These were COVID patients. And I was just treating them. And they signed the consent and everything was copacetic. Everything was clean. But the problem is that we didn't submit that form and the FDA, and the FDA agent was really nice. I mean, nothing, she's doing her job. But, I think at the higher level, the penalty was a little bit too rough.
Yeah, by match. Well, right.
But it's not stopping me from doing research because guess what? I can hire doctors to do research for me. It doesn't need to be doctors. So Dr. Sabine Hazan's name is stained with, a 483. It doesn't matter. I'm still a good researcher and I still have a mind of how to do research. So there are other people that can do research for me. My husband, tag, he's it. So I always I always tell my husband, I'm like, whenever, because I always get myself in these jams. And whenever I get myself in these jams, I'm like, okay, Alon, come and rescue me. And then
But
he's
I,
like,
but
"Why?
I think
Why?
I think you shouldn't have left the cocaine in the White House library, though.
Oh,
That one might have been a little bit much.
Oh, if I even touch cocaine, that would be like
Oh my gosh.
I wouldn't even touch it because I wouldn't want it to affect my microbiome. I'm
love it.
you don't understand. I'm like, like everything I do now is basically I want to, have a long life. I don't want to be damaging my microbiome.
Well,
So I try to avoid fighting with my husband. I avoid like drinking. I'll have maybe one glass of wine once in a while, but I'm pretty good on the most part. So
No, so that's really
no
interesting.
cocaine for me here.
That's right. Well, yeah, but when it's in a ProgenaBiome baggie, it makes people really suspecting. So
I had that during the pandemic. Some fake agent Chang called my cell phone and said, Dr. Hazan, we found some drugs with your prescription in the border of Texas.
What?
And I was like, really? And then I hung up and then I called back the guy and it was a fake agent.
Yes.
So, these scams.
Yeah, I've called somebody back one time pretending to be, I was pretending to be the FBI, and then they laughed and they started swearing at me in Arabic. It was pretty funny.
Oh my God, that's so funny. That's so
Anyway.
funny.
So tell us what happened. The study continued after you got the little slap on the hands and the 483.
The study continued. I'm
Yep.
still doing clinical research.
Yep.
And then what happened was basically they try, the trolls from Twitter are always like pushing it on me. Like, oh, she's got a 483 big, and it's so funny because I have all these doctors that are doing clinical trials because I have a big following in the clinical trial, doctors. And they're like, big deal. It was just a form she forgot to submit. Like, get a hold of yourself. So it's so funny to
How
see.
do they find out about that? How do they even find
Oh,
out?
it's public. It's on the website. Yeah. That's why I'm not even shy about it. I'm like, listen, I've made mistakes. Who doesn't make a mistake is not practicing medicine or research. If you don't make mistakes, you're not doing anything. You're basically at home doing nothing. So you learn from your mistakes.
So when did you tell us about the paper? Because we want
So
to
what
know
happened
the paper you presented.
Yeah, so they couldn't really get me with that because I think the person who tweeted that I got a 483 on social media didn't really get any, motion. And then next thing you know, my paper, the hypothesis of ivermectin increasing the bifidobacteria, and I think I showed it to you before, was the most read from Frontier.
Yes. And when did you publish that paper? Because I don't know. Did we talk about it last time you were on the show?
It wasn't very long ago.
I don't.
No, it was like about a year ago, a year and a half ago.
So
what
more views than 99% of all Frontier's articles, and there's almost 48,000.
Yeah. So here I have an amazing paper that I'm writing that's been seen and observed by everybody. So I published it July 2022.
In which journal?
Frontiers.
Okay, in Frontiers. Got it.
And basically in May, June, they retracted it.
Okay, and so just to slow the wind speed of the hurricane down just a tiny bit for our listeners. So this was the hypothesis that the way ivermectin works in fighting COVID is because it increases your bifidobacteria, because your previous research showed that people that have a certain threshold of bifidobacteria never got seriously ill, never died, never went to the hospital, that kind of thing. Right? So you're like, ivermectin is doing something to your gut. That thing is very good. That appears to be bifidobacteria. That's protecting you from COVID. Yippee-ki-yay.
Right.
Really, not exactly so conspiratorial that we're talking about the JFK assassination and aliens.
No, exactly.
Right.
This is just a little bug called streptomyces that secretes a product, and that product is ivermectin, which is found in the soil. So it's not a big deal. Now, what's interesting is we did do the study on ivermectin to show that actually it did increase the bifidobacteria. And I'm going to show you just briefly the graph. And what we discovered is that it did increase it within 24 hours. Now, obviously, it was accepted. This paper was accepted by another journal. But when the paper of the hypothesis was retracted, that other paper was retracted. It was too hot for them to publish. So, but here's the data. P-value was 0.0001. And in every patient, ivermectin increased the bifidobacteria.
And what did they state was the reason that the paper had to be retracted?
Oh, no reason.
No.
The retraction is because I quoted papers in there that were retracted. Now, remember, we submitted this paper in January of 2022. So it took them 7 months of peer review to begin with, okay? So they had plenty of time to peer review it. They peer reviewed it, they submitted it. In the time that it was in peer review process, some of the other papers that I quoted, you remember some of the papers that were retracted from Dr. Merrick?
Oh, yes. So you quoted papers that were retracted.
And because I quoted them and they were retracted, they felt that it didn't substantiate the ivermectin hypothesis. But here's my thought. It's a hypothesis. It doesn't matter what I quote, if it's retracted or not. I could quote anything on a hypothesis. It's a hypothesis.
Yes.
The whole basis of a hypothesis is basically prove me wrong. So anyways, it was disappointing. But here we go. Here's ivermectin.
So what if you took out the quotes and still presented the data on the study? That's what I'm thinking.
Well, that's what I was thinking too, is why, and here's the p-value.
Yeah, why not just take out the quotes?
So if you take the quotes out.
That's it. That's what I said. Can you see the p-value? 0.0001?
Yes.
So increase in ivermectin, increase pre and post ivermectin.
The whole thing is, if you think if you have a
thought, yeah, that was my point, right? So why am I not allowed to just remove these papers and just keep it as a hypothesis of ivermectin? They didn't let me.
Well,
so even if you quoted all these other, the world is flat, and you're quoting all these other crazy people that think the world is flat or round, I should say, and then you go to the journey and you've proved the point, what does it really matter?
Well, no,
I can't publish the proving of the point.
Yeah, but what it is,
I'm blacklisted almost,
Have you heard of hyperbaric therapy?
If you want better circulation, oxygenation, or respiration,
turn up the volume.
Everyone appreciates the increased energy and clarity.
Athletes, say goodbye to those PRs because you're going to blast
So
them.
how's it work?
We load your body with oxygen.
That means
less inflammation,
fewer allergies,
faster healing, and more.
Come see us, 1200 Executive Parkway.
You know, the Upside Down building.
Call us, 541-636-3278.
That's 541-636-3278.
We have some incredible deals.
Heal, build, and thrive
with New Leaf Hyperbarics.
Got air?
No, but what this is modern day witch trials.
Can you repeat the study? Can you do another study?
Well, I'm still going to try to publish it. I mean, at some point, I'm fighting this. I mean, you think I'm going to just lay? Oh yeah, let me lay down and die and just right. I'm fighting this to the ground. I mean, I'm going to win. There's no way. I paid for those hypotheses. I paid $6,000 to publish that paper. Okay, so refund me my money. If you're retracting my paper, refund me my money with interest. They're like, oh, I'm sorry, it's a retraction. We don't refund the money. Bullshit, it's a retraction and you don't refund. So I'm taking them to court. You better believe it.
Good for you.
No, this is
and I'm exposing it, and I'm not going to stop talking about it till I'm 100 years old, because this is really corruption in medicine. And I'm telling all my friends, and you know me, I'm like a blabbermouth. I tell my friend who tell their friends who tell, and then word of mouth PR, people are going to lose trust in the whole journal. And, there's a big boycott right now going on with Frontiers because of this. Like, a lot of doctors don't want to read this because they feel this is bullshit.
But it's so crazy because it is like the Salem witch trials.
Yeah.
It's like, they say, okay, you're not a witch because you floated, you didn't sink. but we're going to have to retry you because the people that you spoke to after your trial, well, they actually are witches. So now we're going to tie a rock to you to double check and make sure that you float. Oh, you don't float anymore. Whoopsie. I
Right.
mean, it's just completely ridiculous.
No, it's definitely a witch hunt. And women are not witches anymore. They're doctors and scientists. And so what's the problem? Is it because I'm a woman? Is it because I'm North African? What's the problem with my research? I want to know.
So we were talking about that before we started recording. So
Yeah.
people are going to say, well, who are these people that make these decisions on these journals, and who is it that decides?
There's a network. So remember I told you the Ubiome, the beginning?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a scientist that used to work for Ubiome, Elizabeth Bick, works now for a company called PubPeer. PubPeer is making money from who knows, we have no idea, but their sole interest is to discredit physicians or papers that go against the narrative. So their whole interest is to target a physician or a paper and go after every single papers of that person. So I've been targeted, maybe because ProgenaBiome took over Ubiome and is doing it logistically. Who knows? Maybe there's somebody that is pissing off some stockbroker that invested in Ubiome or whatever. But the fact is that, right now there's a network of scientists probably that work. Well, she definitely worked at Ubiome. She was the chief scientist at Ubiome that basically wrote fraudulent papers that allowed Medicare to take on that stool test. So remember, the normals were the proprietors, the company's owners, right? She knew that. Don't tell me she didn't know that. Okay. So that person is basically, she retracted papers from Didier Raoul. She retracted my hypothesis. She's going after. So what she does is, and what they do, she's not the only one. There's a couple of them. They go and they harass the journal and the editor, and they go after them. And if they don't get them, probably with money or funding under the radar, they get them with harassment. And then the journal just, says, okay, I give up, retract the paper. So that's what it is.
So,
but it's hard to expose that because, no paper should be retracted. You realize that in the last 4 years, 400 to 500 papers have been retracted from journals.
Wow.
That's insane.
And before that, I wonder how many had been retracted.
You got retracted if you did something wrong in research.
Right.
Like you recruited psoriasis patients that were diabetic and they never had psoriasis. I mean, that's a bad thing in research. You know what I mean? So, there's definitely some corruption going on. And to me, it doesn't matter. Everything needs to be published. Rewrite the data, redo the science, redo the research, right? Prove me wrong, right? If I'm wrong about ivermectin, I mean, this is an amazing research for anybody to do it. But do it right. Don't fraudulently do it. You know what I mean? Because we've seen what the fraudulent studies have done with hydroxy and ivermectin.
Right.
So, and this is, unfortunately, if I'm right, and it is increasing the bifidobacteria, it could have a role in cancer treatment. We've definitely seen colon cancer with ivermectin. They've definitely tried to use it. I think we need to look. This interference of research and medicine and science is really a big mistake, because at some point that person who interfered is going to be the patient. And I do research for me first to see the truth. Because listen, at the end of the day, I want to know what I'm doing for me that's right. And I'm not going to, mess with that because it's messing up with my longevity in my life, right? So, what did I learn from hydroxychloroquine? I learned that, yes, it kills the virus, but it also kills the gut. Would I take it for me? No, right? So this is what research does. You have to be ethical. You have to see the data for what it is completely. You have to keep seeing stuff, and then you have to come up with, hey, you know what? I was right or I was wrong. When I took on the hydroxychloroquine, Z-Pak, vitamin C, D, and zinc, to me, that was the best formula, right? At the beginning of the pandemic, people are dying. They probably had zero bifidobacteria, the hardest patients. You want to hit it hard. You want to hit it early.
Mm-hmm.
But as the virus weakened, that was no longer that solution. The solution became ivermectin, doxycycline. And as the virus weakened even more, the solution became just vitamins, right?
Right.
So why would I start selling a product and create a pharmaceutical product out of something that is no longer useful, right? If every scientist was like that, we would be a lot better in medicine and science.
We sure would be. So since the Biff, and I just kind of think of Back to the Future every time I say that,
Yeah.
is the kind of most important for so many measures of health, at least having a threshold of bifidobacteria.
I think so.
How much vitamin C, how much vitamin D? Like if people, our listeners are interested and they're like, okay, I want to do something good for my gut. So, I'm going to drink less. I'm going to, what is it? Because I've heard all sorts of stuff that,
So I came up with this formula at the beginning of the pandemic, which was really like off the cuff, was 3,000 vitamin C, 3,000 for a healthy individual, 3,000, 3,050. I created them because I noticed that there was a lot of contamination in the vitamins. I didn't really trust the vitamins at CVS. So I created a product called ZincD, ZINCD. Every one of those patients that buy these vitamins, I test them and I continue to follow up with them. We also monitor the bifidobacteria with these vitamins. That's what I took myself when I killed my own bifidobacteria. So right now that's what I'm seeing. However, I think for someone that has a lot of bifidobacteria, just maintain your vitamin D level at a certain level. I don't think you need the C and the zinc particularly, right? If you're lactose intolerant, what we've noticed, but again, this is preliminary research. We've not finished the data. But what we've seen in a couple cases here and there is when they take the vitamin C, D, and zinc for 3 months, their lactose intolerance improves. And I think it happens because vitamin C and vitamin D, we've noticed, increase your bifidobacteria, but zinc increases your lactobacillus and your firmicutes. So I think the combination of the lacto and the bifido is probably symbiotic together to create, a good microbiome, a good immunity. However, there's other things, there's other vitamins, right? There's copper, selenium, there's, vitamin B is important. So I think all that, that's why you go to the doctor to check your vitamin D level, to check your copper level, your zinc level. All my patients that we put on vitamin C, D, and zinc, we check a copper level, zinc, and vitamin D every 6 months.
I was going to say, because I know that, I hear of these things and some of the stuff I read, it's like you have to be careful, especially with the zinc, because then you can be deficient in copper, etc. So
but not so much. It's amazing how little copper you need, right? So not so much. But that's why, again, you go to the doctor, you check your vitamin D level, you check your zinc, you check your copper, you check your CBC, you check your liver enzymes, your platelets. I mean, this is all part of, medicine. This is what we do as doctors, right? I mean, so I don't like to give this was a number that I came up at the beginning of the pandemic. I think now, I would just say, take your vitamin D level, make sure your vitamin D level is adequate, and gut health, with nutrition and all that. That's what I think.
So as far as gut health in general, like Tim asked, do you still recommend people just willy-nilly take prebiotics and probiotics, or is that very specific?
I like prebiotics. Prebiotics is your fiber. You can never have enough fiber, in my opinion.
Well, I know there's prebiotic capsules that people are buying across the,
I mean, but there's also prebiotics, in the foods,
yes.
Your potatoes, your fennel, your butternut squash. You've got so many foods that mimic that. Your prunes, there's so many good foods that have all that. Probiotics, I'm doing a lot of clinical trials on the probiotics. I have a problem with probiotics. So one is it really the probiotic that it says on the bottle?
Yes.
Two, is the probiotic alive or dead? Is it made in a factory where all these bacteria are exposed to air? remember, you're mimicking bacteria that's anaerobic. It doesn't breathe oxygen, right? So as soon as you expose these bacteria to oxygen, do they just die? So that's another thing. What is the capsule made of, right? Is the capsule going to kill my microbiome, right? Is there some, arsenic in the vitamins? Is there some contamination or in the probiotic? And then the last thing is, much like laxatives, and I want you to think of this. Remember with laxatives, when people take laxatives, all of a sudden their colons stop working and then they become, constipated, and then they need the bigger, and then we end up having to take out their colons because they're laxative abuse, right?
Right.
Are we doing the same? Or pancreatic enzymes, right? When you take pancreatic enzymes, well, great, you feel good, you're digesting, but then are you stopping your own pancreas from secreting pancreatic enzymes? And therefore, are you stopping that mechanism? So same thing with the probiotics. I wonder if maybe by taking these probiotics, we're making our colon lazy in, developing microbes, in growing microbes, because it's going to say, well, she's about to give me probiotics. Why do I need to grow any? I'm going to be getting a family, billions of probiotics.
Interesting.
So those are my questions, right? So, in taking probiotics, am I suppressing my own ability to create an environment of probiotics, to make my body work, right? So, and why do I say that? Because I see too many patients that have taken probiotics for years that should have had a lot of bifidobacteria and that have zero, and they're on probiotics. So is it the quality of the probiotics? Is it the fact that it's dead probiotics? Is it the fact that there's no probiotics in there? Or is it the fact that it's suppressing their ability to grow these bifidobacteria, the environment, So that's why. So we're testing. There's a couple of good probiotics that I'm testing. Nothing that I'm going to say out there because I don't want to have the factory be burnt. But there's a couple of good probiotics that I'm testing for people that have lost all the bifido and don't have any bifidobacteria. So we're testing that. That's going to be coming out. It's really a shame about the corruption of the publication. And it's really a shame that these journals have, fallen for those, retractions, right? Because a scientist like me that has so much knowledge from all the research I've done, I'm not being able to share it to the world. And it's a shame because there's a lot of things I've learned that I learned from, seeing patients and testing their microbiome, right? Doing the clinical trials and testing the microbiome. That's a huge science that nobody really is doing.
Is there any studies on vaccines and the gut microbiome?
Well, we did one. We did the study before and after, and we showed that it actually kills your bifidobacteria, and it persists in killing the bifidobacteria. We basically published it when we presented it as a poster at the American College of Gastro. Mm-hmm. So luckily, that's an automatic publication. So that's how I'm doing it right now, is basically just presenting to my peers, my research, and just going with the flow. And if it gets accepted, it gets accepted. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And, maybe one day research will be ethical again and righteous, and more research will come out and we'll have new discoveries. We've been at a standstill really in the last, I would say 30 years, 40 years, don't you think? I mean, new discoveries, not much.
Oh,
absolutely. At least, if not 60 years. So
and the days of Louis Pasteur and the days of, Madame Curie, in my opinion, are just gone.
No, it's exactly right. So how was that? That was very well received at the American Gastro Conference, right?
Yeah, it got a poster. It got the best award research, so it was great. Yeah.
So
and actually, that was probably the poster that got a lot of GI doctors asking questions, because, like you, they were like, "Well, wait a minute. It's supposed to be modulating the microbiome. It's supposed to improve your immunity. Right. Why is it killing the bifidobacteria? Bifidobacteria, that's $1 trillion industry of probiotics, right?" So, and actually, the physician that came to me and asked me that question has done a lot of clinical trials, was one of my mentors when I was at University of Florida. and asked me that question. And he's big on probiotics. So that was a big question for him. Why is the vaccine doing that? And, the agency paid attention to that research. Don't be fooled that, my research doesn't get paid attention. I had an FDA agent come to my poster at Digestive Disease Week when I was presenting on, loss of bifidobacteria in invasive cancer. And she asked me the question. She said, well, what do you think it is? Is it cause or effect? Did the loss of bifidobacteria cause the cancer, or did the cancer cause the loss of bifidobacteria? Great question. And I basically told her, I said, I don't know. This is why we do research. This is why we advance science, right? So, but the fact is, like, when you start following the path of the bifidobacteria, right, you notice loss of bifidobacteria. We published a poster again on loss of bifidobacteria in Crohn's disease, naive Crohn's patients. Lyme disease, loss of bifidobacteria. Invasive cancer, loss of bifidobacteria. And now we're seeing kids whose moms were vaccinated with COVID vaccine and were breastfeeding. Remember, the messenger RNA spike protein passes through the breast milk. So these kids are born to zero bifidobacteria when you're supposed to be born with like 90% bifidobacteria. So what is going on with those kids that have zero bifidobacteria? We're following those kids to see, are those kids going to develop autism? Does it start maybe with the loss of bifidobacteria? Those are the questions I have. I mean, that's what science is about, right? Science is about asking questions, being a detective. In a sense, I am kind of like FBI and CIA, medicine and research. And I've had that discussions with FBI agents, by the way. They're like, yes, you are like us because you're doing research, you're asking questions. We need to.
Well, and that's, it's interesting because I read a Substack yesterday, I think, and it was really fascinating because this guy was talking about totalitarianism, and he's like, well, when he talks to his friends, they're saying things like, well, we don't have the death camps, and we don't have the holding cells, and he goes, yeah, okay, I get that, but here's the thing. What started every single totalitarian regime was censorship.
Yes.
It was the ability to not ask questions. As soon as you can't ask a question, that's when you slam on the brakes, freak out, and say, enough. Okay. It's one thing if you want to censor profane speech or pornography or whatever, whatever the society deems as, a moral transgression. But when you can't ask a question, even if it is certifiably insane, you no longer live in a free society.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, here's my husband on the phone. Alon, I'm on the podcast. So we're now live on a podcast and everybody's hearing you. So is there anything urgent, honey?
Yes, there's a staff need to check someone's microbiome here.
That's awesome.
I mean, an immediate stool set and a stat interpretation. Is that possible, doctor?
Not really. So we'll have to wait. He has a great sense of humor, by the way. At some point, you guys need to have it on.
That's awesome.
All right. Love you. I'll speak to you later.
For sure.
He always tells me, he's like, I'm in a meeting. Don't call me between 5 and 6 because I'm in a meeting. I forgot to tell him I had a podcast.
That's funny. Stat interpretation of a stool sample. I love it.
We're doing a cholesterol study, him and I. He's giving me his patients with high cholesterol so we can see if there's a microbiome signature on the cholesterol. So
fascinating.
Yeah, no, this stuff is it's interesting because I've gone down a lot of rabbit holes. Some of the stuff I'm like, yeah, this is, obviously lots of it isn't correct, but you get these little nuggets of truth.
yes.
And one of the things that always pops up, no matter who I listen to, is the microbiome. It's all is it everything? No, but man, it is a massive piece to this medical puzzle.
Oh, and it's let me tell you, in a way for me, it's like being Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom. I mean, it's the Holy Grail. There's no question. I mean, like every day I cannot tell you every day is Christmas. Wow. Every day I discover things that I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know this. Oh my God, this is how this medication works. And it's just, wow. So, and to answer your question of before, which was, we went from the germ theory to the terrain theory, I think somewhere in the middle is the answer, right?
Absolutely.
I think, when you look at cancer and chemo, I think, yes, wipe out the cancer, get rid of the tumor, get rid of the microbes that are overgrown, but then replenish. Don't just kill. And really, if you think about it, that's what I did with COVID, right? I was all about kill the virus as fast as possible, right? With hydroxy and Z-Pak, and then boost the bifidobacteria with the vitamin C, vitamin D, and ivermectin to increase and to get rid of, to improve the immunity in a way to recreate a balance. So I think without even doing fecal transplant, so to me, that's the holy grail. That's going to be, and you've heard it here first, there's going to be a time where we're going to discover all these cancers are viruses or bacteria.
Yep.
Much like H. pylori is stomach cancer, HPV is cervical cancer, EBV, HCV, hepatitis C with, liver cancer. So I think there's going to be a time where we're going to start seeing, viruses that are linked up with cancer. So we are actually, I'm very excited because we're developing at ProgenaBiome a viral pipeline, which is going to be thousands of viruses that we're going to be picking up in the stools. So, which is going to be exciting to see all these viruses, the balance of the viruses versus the balances of the bacteria.
Microbiome.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, right. And that is an excellent point because viral balance matters dramatically.
100%.
And people forget about that. It's not that every virus is bad.
Yes, 100%.
There's four quadrillion viruses in the world, and only a tiny portion are pathologic.
Mm-hmm.
So to wipe out viruses is also completely insane.
Right.
It's a balance.
And viruses are much smaller than bacteria, right? So you think of a virus, it's like 1/20th of the size of a bacteria. And so what space are they taking on in the gut, right? And if we wipe out all the bacteria in the gut, do we just leave the space for these viruses to grow? That's the other thing. And then do you become more susceptible to viruses like a tomato virus? Did you know that on a tomato there's a virus, or on a pepper
I think
there's a virus?
viruses for all kinds of foods, for
There's
sure.
viruses, all sorts of things. So I think it's a great opportunity to be in this field. I think it's going to be the future. I think we just need to be humble and realize that we don't know much, and we can't just say, this is it. It's cut and dry. This is this way. No, there's so many ways, there's so many ways to get to Rome. It's not just one way.
And I think that's the thing that hopefully is coming back now as people lose trust in a lot of these 3-letter agencies. Like, for the love of God, in the last week, the CDC published that you can give men a shit ton of hormones and get them to, chest feed. So okay, so all these drugs are off label for inducing lactation in a naturally born male, and B, there's zero evidence of what it does to an actual infant. But somehow that becomes a CDC recommendation. I mean, 99% of what they say could be correct, but as soon as they cross the Rubicon into that kind of bullshit, no one's going to believe anything you say, regardless of how good your data is for everything else.
And I think the majority of people, right? The majority of people are still seeing this as like, a little bit questioning all this new woke movement, right? Because we've gone like so far where, I just read the other day, like, a man wants to have a uterus implant so he can abort. That is like, why would you want to have a uterus and the surgery and the complication so you could get pregnant and then abort? What's the point of that? So to me, that person is not really rational, right? But yet we're putting that person on stage and we're making a big drama out of that. And, this is how they sell. This is how they, they come at you, and this is how they attack you, because all of a sudden you, who are the majority, are now being suppressed by the minority.
Yep. No, that's a cult.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's a cult where the unholy sacrament in that cult is abortion. I mean, I've said that a gazillion times, and
Well,
if it gets me canceled, it gets me canceled. Like,
but
so be it.
it's also like, I'll tell you, it's a lot of it is population control. You know,
Oh
I
yeah, for sure.
whether you like, this whole trans movement of promoting this whole thing, to me, is also population control.
Yeah, because you're sterilizing an entire
Mhm.
generation of kids.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think, I think the whole thing is population control, in my opinion. I think I think we're going to have a problem with having a population in the future, if you ask me, because we are going to have a lot more chronic disease. We are going to have a lot more autism, a lot more Parkinson's, a lot more cancer. And if we don't get a handle on that fast, we're not going to have people taking care of us when we're older and in need of that. But you were saying before, propaganda and censorship. Listen, what did they do in Germany? Here we are talking about retraction of papers. What did they do in Germany? They burned the books.
Yep.
That's what we're doing right now with these retractions of papers. The equivalent, it's burning books.
Mhm.
And you're burning the idea of someone. Well, what gives you the right to burn the idea of someone, right? So
No, that's crazy.
Perfectly said.
Well, we could go on forever,
yes.
but thank you so much. Where can everyone find you and find ProgenaBiome, because it is amazing?
ProgenaBiome.com. So Dr. Hazen at ProgenaBiome. And that's it. They can just reach out to us, and everything's there.
And your Twitter has blown
Twitter.
up,
Yes, it has.
and your Instagram. You need to help us with that, because I have
Yes. I'm gonna actually post and tweet you guys.
because
You're gonna have to
am
get some bird skills and learn how to tweet.
I am very tweetless.
You
But-
need to get on Twitter. You need to get on it.
So-
Especially bullshit free MD needs to be out there.
Yeah.
So-
Okay. Well, it's on there. I do have at BSFreeMD now, so people can find.
Okay, so then tweet and then tell
start
me.
talking on there.
Okay. She's like, stop talking
Stop
to
talking
me.
at home and start talking on there.
Yeah, talk on Twitter and get out there and start speaking, and I'll connect you and I'll tag you, and you'll
Yes.
get on there.
So
Okay?
we will link those as
You've
well.
done so many great podcasts. People need to see them.
I know. Absolutely
know.
right.
You two are such a dynamic duo. I love seeing you guys.
Well, we love having you on here. Thanks for taking the time, because you're so busy and you're always. I love watching your posts and where you are around the world and what you're doing and what lion's poop or elephant's poop you're testing or whatever it is.
I took poop of monkeys and camels when I was in Morocco.
Gosh.
So I'm excited.
How do you do that? Do you go up to a zoo and you just ask?
No, the monkeys were literally in front of the bus. And it was so weird because one of the monkey was licking the butt of the baby monkey. So the mom was literally licking the butt of the baby monkey. And my sister was like, look, she's doing fecal transplant. And the next thing you know, she has a bowel movement in front of the bus. And I'm
No.
like, okay, wait. And they were kind of like almost jumping at me. So I'm like, I scooped it up really fast. And then next thing you know, I had it. And then I took a camel ride in the desert because I wanted to analyze the microbiome of the most remote place in the Sahara Desert. And basically, in the desert, it was actually near Ouarzazate,
Wow.
So,
So will we find you getting penguins and polar bear shit someday?
I've done penguins already. I've done the penguins. I was in Australia when I did the penguins. But the polar bears I haven't done. Lions I did in Zimbabwe.
Yep.
Giraffes I did in Zimbabwe. But okay, the camel was really funny because my brother was on the camel in front of me. And they were kind of like attached. We were like riding the camel to get to the dunes to see the sunrise. And all of a sudden the camel's like pooping right in front of me. I'm like, stop. And the guy was like, well, what's going on? I'm like, wait, I got off. I'm like scooping. I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I can go. And my husband, my sister were there and they were like all laughing because they're like, of course, this is classic.
It's the holy grail, the gold nuggets.
It's such the gold nugget. So it's so funny because I bring these stool samples to my lab director, right? And I'm like, okay, I've got camel, I've got monkey. The other day I had a coyote in my backyard that just like pooped fresh. So I go, I have Coyote. She's like, Dr. Hazen, you do realize these stool samples are $1,500 every time you do them. And I'm like, yeah, but I want to see. So she, she's like very, she protects me. She doesn't want me to like, lose my shirt over this. But, it is exciting. Like, I'll be with my tubes and, I'll be in the middle of nowhere and I'll see some like microbes and I'll just scoop it and put it in and bring it back to my lab.
Well, we have some nutria and deer in our backyard. Maybe I can get some.
Yeah, that would be fun. So I'm actually testing the cows of farmers now too. The cow poop.
No,
Yes,
that would
that
be
would-
super
that
fun.
would be very
Because I
interesting.
want to make sure that they're not, vaccinated. They don't have, tons of E. coli or anything like that. So, yeah, so I'm part of the beef initiative, mainly because I want to support them and I want to make sure they don't want to vaccinate their cows. They're very clean. Those cows
Right.
run wild. So, and because it's important to me, right? Because when I feed my patients and I'm trying to change their microbiome, I'm trying to refloralize their gut, I can't give them meat that the cow got antibiotics, because then that defies the purpose of rebuilding your gut.
Right.
If your beef that you're eating has a ton of antibiotics, has
Absolutely.
taken a lot of antibiotics or vaccines. So basically that's what I'm testing. So I'm very cautious because so much of it is like you can replenish. So let's say you find the perfect probiotic and you give them the vitamins and you give them all that and you boost their microbiome. But then they kill it with something else that they didn't know, like a hamburger, that's bad. So, you got to be careful.
Well, I don't even think I like Corvettes as much as Sabine likes doing medical research, and that says a lot.
She gets so jazzed about it, which is awesome. I love people that are passionate about what they do. We need that in the world for sure.
Absolutely. And if you haven't listened already, go back and listen to our other 3 episodes with her. They're all amazing. Every single time it blows my mind. And one of the things I love the most about what she talks about is how we're just scraping the surface. We're just barely figuring this out, because you hear so much BS in the microbiome world. Imagine that, about how, this guy's got the secret formula yogurt or whatever. And it's just, and she's just like, the more I look into this, the more we know what we don't know,
Right.
which always makes me, really happy as far as the integrity of what she's doing.
Yeah. I don't know. Makes me want to get my microbiome checked yet again. I might have done that once already. See if mine's more healthy now that I've been downing all that kefir.
I'm scared that mine would break the refrigerators that she has.
I can attest to that. Anyway, enough of that. We have a shout out for you guys, and this week it's Autumn177 on Instagram. Hi, Autumn. Thank you so much for engaging with us on our latest post. Super fun to see you point out how much you loved it. Hope to see you around on our other posts. We appreciate you, and I appreciate that you liked Tim's EDM ad-libbing.
Yeah, it was terrible, actually. It was really terrible. All right, till next week.
Till next week. MedicalExpertWitness.com's online program and coaching calls teach you how they grow dozens of thriving medical expert practices. Book a free call. Take the first step in achieving your medical expert witness goals with a free 30-minute call.
Don't miss out on the incredible opportunity to get your medical witness expert practice up and running. Visit medicalexpertwitness.com to sign up.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
While we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible, we can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.